So big welcome to CRS 512 Curriculum Studies in Geography. You'll find most of the resources that you'll need to look at each week here on the Moodle website. And you're required to give about 10 hours a week study to each of your subjects, including this subject, of which you'll need to put about 5 hours a week into the material such as that which is online, and about 5 hours a week into your assignments, of which you have 3 here. I've put an introduction to myself as the lecturer for this subject this semester online, so you can open that up and read through that. And then I have also encouraged you to put your own post online of a little bit about yourself. So I've been a school teacher in high schools initially for about 8, 10, 12 or more years. And then I moved into school chaplaincy, church pastoring, and then moved back into school teaching again for a number of years. And then I completed a master's degree and then went on and did a PhD looking at history and geography and other subjects and sociology. And since that time, I've also continued to be involved in church ministry as well. And I'm encouraging you to place under the connections and discussion forum some information about yourself. And so I've placed a bit of information about myself here, and then others are encouraged to place some information about themselves on that as well. So thank you for those who have done that. Each week, there'll be some information that you'll go through. There's an outline of the subject that you're able to get the background information for this subject on. This subject changes a little bit from year to year, so you may find some differences from some of these details. If you find word count or other things majorly different, then get in touch and we'll work with you on that. You'll see the details of the learning outcomes that we are seeking to pursue, which link with the general learning outcomes that your school will be aiming for in subjects such as geography that we are studying. And it's worth reading through these, getting a feel for what is being covered there. In today's lesson, I want to focus mainly on the assessment items that are going to be covered, and we'll look at those in greater detail. I also encourage you to spend some time each week, up to 5 hours, going through each of the topics. And so this week we have in week 1 an introduction to the curriculum for the Australian curriculum framework and also the New South Wales curriculum framework. So I encourage you to read through this material and to develop familiarity with the curriculum requirements for the New South Wales Government Education Department and also the curriculum requirements for the Australian curriculum, of which there can be some differences. It's quite interesting to look here at the major themes that are being covered, such as the earth and its natural systems, which include the landforms, the sea and the water, and also the air. And of course, we have climate change as a major issue, as the amount of carbon dioxide in the air and methane has increased over the last 100 years after the Industrial Revolution, and we've been burning fossil fuels like coal and oil and petrol, and the temperature of the Earth is likely to have risen at least 0.8 of 1 degree and possibly up towards 1.5 degrees. And so we're getting hotter summers, and we're getting more frequent bushfires, and water levels are rising in some parts of the world, such as Bangladesh and Pacific Islands, and this will eventually affect us as well. And there's fortuitously a move towards solar and electric systems So that may help to some degree, but we're not quite moving fast enough to solve that. So there's a whole discussion on the Earth's natural systems, and then the human environmental interactions flows into this, where we're having an effect on the environment, which we can look at. And then there's human geography, which I find particularly interesting. And then there's the methods that are used in geography that can also be looked at and examined there. And in year 12, there's a deeper examination of some of these themes, including sustainability and rural and urban places and ecosystems and global biodiversity. And you're asked in your assessment items to look more deeply at these. So I want to spend some more time now looking at the assessment items in greater depth, but also reminding you to look each week at one of the topics. So this week we'll be looking at topic 1. Next week you're asked in your own time to look at topic 2, and then each week, week 3, topic 3, week 4, topic 4, and to do some readings in that 5 or so hours that you put into working through the topic material. And if you have any questions about that, then please get in touch. Notice there's a fair bit of emphasis on you doing the reading and the research. It's student-centred rather than the teacher doing all of the work. But certainly if you have any questions or you want to discuss any of the material that's covered in greater depth, I'm very happy to do that and to share some of the insights that I have. And there are other resources. As a teacher, you'll also be expected to do a fair bit of information gathering. So this emphasis on you gathering the information is good preparation for what will happen likely in the future as you gather the information and then you prepare it for the students. And then one of the other things that you'll need to put a fair bit of time into is reflecting on how you work with the students and how you do well in encouraging the students in their activities. So week 2, you're asked to read material on teaching the whole child, on student-centered learning, how to make the learning effective and interesting. And there's some readings each week that I encourage you to read through, take notes on. And this is not just to pass and not just to get good marks in the assignment. This is to give you resources so that you'll be a more effective teacher. And I encourage you to spend some time here in these different resources in order to develop your skills and abilities over the 10 to 12 weeks of the course. Looking now more deeply at the assignments, 3 assignments have been set. And the first assignment requires you to do a field work project. So prepare a field work activity that might last up to a day for your class. And you don't have to go out into the wider world. You could do this on the school grounds, and you could look at something such as water and the school grounds. And so there'll be a certain amount of water will fall on the school grounds. You could calculate that. You could work out what the rainfall is on your area of grounds. What's the area of grounds? Where does the rain water go? What are the needs for that water? Plant needs and all the other environmental needs. You could do a study on that. So you could do a fieldwork project on the school, and then we've got sunlight on the school, and you could look at the sun's energy. There's all sorts of other projects that you could do on the school. So field work could be done even on the school grounds, or it could be done virtually, whereby you could visit the Antarctic or visit another part of New South Wales. You could visit the Barrier Reef, and I think a virtual trip to the Barrier Reef, and the issues faced by the Barrier Reef would be interesting. Be interesting to get 3D glasses, wouldn't it? And be able to do a whole 3D activity on the Barrier Reef. So there's lots that you could do for your fieldwork project. So you're asked to construct the teacher's plan and a student handout to support a one-day fieldwork study. Then that could be anything from 1 or 2 hours through to 4 to 6 hours. And you need to incorporate geographic tools and geographic skills and their development. You need to look at achievable inquiries, investigation and challenges for the students, and particularly for students of varying abilities. And you'll find in the classroom now you can have students who are 1 or 2 years younger than your class mentally or age-wise in your class, and you've got to be able to cope with these range of interests and abilities. The major theme that we'll also look at is sustainability, which is one of the United Nations goals that's being looked at. We also ask you to look out for the students' wellbeing and safety and plan for that. And also you need to look at the topic ecosystems at risk, which is a major concern as our Earth's population has increased from 1 billion to 2, 3, 4, 5, now up to 6, 7 or more billion people on the Earth. And so there are pressures on the ecosystems and on the trees being cut down. And so you need to look at these ecosystem questions and sustainability in order to prepare for the future and future generations. So that's assignment 1, prepare a fieldwork project, which could be in the school, or you might want to prepare an interesting project whereby you could go to a reserve. And so there could be a nearby reserve that you could look at. You could even invite First Nations people to talk about the way they have approached working with the natural environment. You could look at ecological restoration, water sensitive design, green infrastructure, and you could bring in experts on these to talk to the students. You could look at issues of sustainability, urban planning, ecosystem rehabilitation, and again, you could bring in guest speakers who could also speak on this. You could look at green roofs. You could look at native plants. You could look at sustainability officers and site managers, energy and water efficient analysis of buildings, either the buildings at your school or nearby or more distant. You could look at carbon offset, heat island effects. They could use thermometers and other instruments to measure some of the things that are taking place. Alternatively, you could travel to a farming area and plan activities for your field work that could relate to farming and agriculture. It depends where your interests are. Interestingly, if you had a particular background in sociology or psychology, you could link that to what you are doing. You go to national parks and plan to look at fire and fire management, or look at invasive species, or look at the natural species that are there as opposed to introduced species. You could look at photographic monitoring and even get the students to take photos and see what they could find from the photos even when they go back to their classroom. You could look at rainforests and rainforest ecosystems. You could look at wetland ecosystems. You could also go to coastal dune ecosystems and do some consideration of what's there. You could go to World Heritage heritage areas, look at mangroves and estuaries, coral reefs. And if you can't go there, you could do a virtual field work. So there's lots of different resources that you could look at for assignment one. Bethany, um, uh, did you want me to turn the video off or leave it on as you tell us a bit more about your thoughts on assignment one?
Oh no, that's fine. Happy for it to keep running.
Yeah,
Um,
Bethany, what are your thoughts?
yeah, so I had only read through the task requirements. So I didn't study senior geography in school, and my school that I work at doesn't actually run it at the moment. So this is all really new to me. Um, but um I like the idea of the virtual field work because that could also
Mm,
incorporate and address um, like ICT general capabilities as well and incorporate.
mm,
Um, but yeah, just the I also really like I know that close to me, my local area, we have botanic gardens where they do have members from Indigenous Australian communities who run workshops on management of the gardens and plant species in particular. So I feel like that could be something I look into. Um, I know that
yeah.
in
Mm.
stage 5 at my school, the kids do a coastal management report for that, for the stage 5 syllabus. But I feel like that could also, because we're quite close to the beach. So I feel like there could be something there in coastal management even. Um, but yes, this is all very new to me, so I'm curious to see how the stage 6 syllabus, might be able to be applied here. Um, but this document that you're showing is really helpful, just with all the ideas, because I would not have known where to start.
Things you can ask is where will the students' interest be?
Yeah.
Where will their futures be? And so, some students, if they had a lot of interest in surfing and the beach,
Mm,
they may have a high level of interest in beach and coastal management. If some students had a high level of interest in native plants and Indigenous people, and you had some Indigenous students, they may have
mm,
that. And if some students had a high level of interest in using computers and screens, then the virtual field work could also be very interesting in that they could go with different activities. So I think it's important to reflect on where is the students' futures going to be, what sort of activities will they be involved in, where are the students' interests likely to be, and there's all sorts of areas that can be looked at. And there's all those human and urban areas that can be looked at as well. So there's some things to think about for the next time we meet in 2 weeks' time, and to remember that this first assignment, even though it's only 1,000 or so words plus 800 words, 1,800 words. Um, the marks really come most for depth of analysis and of the issues. And if you find that some of your planning, you need lots of words about the activity, I'm happy if you use an appendix for some of that extra material. So the appendix is not marked, but it's a way that if you want to focus more words on the analysis of the issues, such as why field work is valuable, how it gets students engaging with tools where they're not just doing theory, but they're actually using tools such as measurement tools, scientific instruments in order to actually do the work. Then those sorts of issues are important. And then there are curriculum issues. And then there are student issues, how you get students involved. So they're the sort of things that we want a bit of depth of analysis in, but we then also need the topic covered as well, whether it be the botanic gardens. And that's why I'm saying that you could actually use an appendix where topic material that goes on and on. You wouldn't have to take so much care with that material on, say, botanic gardens. Um, because that's going to be just the material that you're going to hand out to the students. So you wouldn't have to put a lot of material into that. I think where the marks is real gained is where you do the analysis of the issues in the teaching, of the issues of why fieldwork is important and those sorts of issues there. So if you have any questions to ask for assignment one, and then we'll look at that again in 2 weeks' time as well. In the second assignment, which we'll spend more time on in about 7 weeks or so's time, um, in week 7 and week 9, we'll talk a bit more about the lesson plan sequence of around 2,000 words. So you've got around 1,000 words on the lesson plans, and there's 5 of them, so about 200 words on each. And again, if you need more words, then an appendix could be used for longer lesson plans. And so you're only marked on the 200 words that goes into the assignment. But if you find you need a couple of pages of 600 words or so, times 5 would be 3,000 words. You could have that in an appendix if you wanted to put that extra material there. It gives you a bit more freedom for that. So you're asked to develop 5 lessons on biophysical interactions. And you're asked to then have at least half of your work on justification for what you're looking at, including theories and models and approaches for what you're doing and your lesson design and how you're doing it. So again, it's the theory that is going to give you the marks rather than the actual content. And you could use an appendix to have 2 or 3,000 words in content, but that wouldn't be marked. It's the theory and the ideas that we do most of the mark. So again, what sort of things could you look at in terms of the biophysical interactions? As an example, you could have an introduction that discusses the importance of understanding, say, 4 aspects of the biological and physical world. So firstly, it's important for people to know something about the earth and the materials and the geology and the soil and the landforms and the mountains and the seas and the rivers, all that physical material that's out there. If you're going to do well in life, if you're a farmer or if you're a planner, knowing something about what's out there in terms of the materials, even things like climate. And I have friends who have farming ventures, and one has some cattle, and you choose one part of the state to put cattle. The climate's going to affect things, the soil's going to affect things, and you'll have a lot more success or less success knowing something about what is called the lithosphere, the earth. And then also you need to know something about the weather, and close to a mountain you might have good rainfall. The other side of the mountain there might be a rain shadow and you don't have much rainfall. And so you always have these weather and climate questions. And then you have the rivers that flow down. Some people will be close to the rivers, they'll have some plenty of water, and other people will be further away and they won't have some water. And some will have so much water they'll get flooded away every 10 years. And so knowing something about the water systems, what is called the hydrosphere, and then important for us as geographers who consider the plants. And so plant geography is important, and then there's animal geography, and then there is also human geography as well that's important. So all of these things are important. We're mainly looking here at the biophysical interactions, and then in another section we'll look at the urban systems. These are particularly important for local planning, urban resilience, disaster preparedness, sustainability planning. You have to plan where the water goes when we have a lot of it falls at some time, and climate change is leading to more frequent events where we have huge amounts of rain come in a small period of time. You have to consider this when making decisions about zoning and development. You have to consider this when you make decisions about zoning and development relating to fire. A lot of people love to have beautiful houses out in the forest areas, and then once every 10 years there can be a forest fire can come through and burn down half the houses in the area. And so this raises questions. How do we make houses more adaptable? How do we zone it as governments? All of these are decisions that need to be considered. So these are things that can be important in this discussion of how we interact with the physical environment, the climate environment, the rain environment, the dryness environment, such as that which causes bushfires. And then even families and individuals need to make decisions about where they live, where they build houses, where they raise cattle or plants. All of these things are shaped by geographic environmental factors there, and that can be investigated in this assignment. So a student's understanding of the biophysical interactions is far more than academic. It's part of a literacy, an environmental or applied environmental literacy that helps them understand the world around them, and whether it be for local government, community involvement, family life, or employment, or just individual flourishing, we need to know something more about environment if we're going to live flourishing lives, sustainable lives, and manage risks and respond intelligently to the environment and its opportunities, changes, and challenges. So the plan that you could develop could include a consideration of these four aspects, the lithosphere, the biosphere, the hydrosphere, and the atmosphere. And that's covered in the studies there that you'll see for the New South Wales curriculum on geography. And then you could develop discussions of, these are just some examples, learning intentions, content focus, activities, assessment, learning, geographic tools, and then you could have each of the lessons there, 5 lessons there. One lesson could be an introduction, and then another lesson that could be on the lithosphere, that is the earth and mountains and rocks, and then another lesson that could be on the hydrosphere and the water, and another lesson on the atmosphere and the climate, whether it be cold and hot and brings fires or brings cooler weather and frosts. And then there could be a lesson on bringing it all together with a systems approach that looks at the interaction and relationship and how humans respond. And then you could even add something linking back to your first assignment, that is excursions and activities. So that's the second one there. Are there any questions on assignment 2, which is 5 lessons? You've got 1,000 words on the lessons and 1,000 words on the justification. Any questions on that, particularly Bethany?
Just wondering, the titles of the units that are in the assessment descriptions, I think they're from the old Stage 6 geography syllabus.
Yes.
Um, so I'm just wondering what document we should be using, or whether we should be
If you
adapting
can,
the assessment
yeah,
to
if you can go with
2022.
the more recent one, then that's worth going for, particularly in 2027. There's a more recent document that's coming in. So if you can go with the more recent documents, then you'll find that more useful for the future. But you're quite right. A lot of the material that we've got on this lesson plan will come from the previous years up to 2025, which is where we are now. But 2027, there's more materials coming in. Does that help?
Yeah, I think for the 11 to 12 syllabus, they just had a new one in 22. I don't think
Yes,
they're
that's
coming out
correct.
with one in 27. I think that's just for stage 4 and
That's right.
5.
Yes,
Um,
you're right.
so
Yep.
and the title of the units are completely different. So I'm just wondering what matches
Yes.
up with what.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll have a look at it too. So if you can go
Okay.
with the more recent titles. Yep. And my notes are mainly linked to the older titles.
Mm.
Yep. So yeah, if you can go with the more recent titles, and then also in the as we meet each fortnight, if you can bring up material that you're working on and what you're suggesting, then very happy to work with that. I think the major point is that you'll want 50% of your work on the justification. That's where your marks are really going to come from. And then the other 50% of the work on the lessons, you're really wanting material that you can use in the future. And as you say, in 2022, material came in, so that'll be the material you want to be working with rather than this older material, which goes back earlier. Yep.
So would you, if possible, would it be possible if you could let us know which
Yeah.
units match up
Yeah.
in between the 99 syllabus
Yeah.
and the 2022?
Yeah, I'll do that. Yep.
Thank
So I'll do that for next time. I'll put some more time into that too. Yep. Sounds good. And then if with the third one, you're asked to do um, another project. Oops, I've gone too far. And assessment three, you're asked to do an online comparatives case study assessment task, I think. And this is longer word count and 40% due in week 12, where you're asked, I understand, to work on either urban places or people and economic activity. So you choose one or the other and you do a comparative case study on those. And then again, a lot of the marks will come from justification, where you're looking at theories and models and approaches that are used in lessons in assessment design, though, of course, the content will mainly focus on urban places or people and economic activity. And as an example, um, example one, New South Wales Year 12, Stage 6, urban places is a core focus area. And notice in the previous ones, we were looking at plant and environment and mountains and rocks and soils. In this one, you're looking at people and urban places. And so you're looking at what leads to urban growth, urban decay, urban renewal, and urban spatial plans. How do we respond and manage the changes that are taking place in urban environments? So you could use case studies such as Wollongong or an area near where you live. What's the changes to the patterns of where people live and why they move? You could include learning activities such as fieldwork that does various sorts of mapping of urban areas. Where do people live? One that I found fascinating is the urban sprawl and suburbanisation and the huge shopping centres that have replaced the small strip shops. All of those sorts of things I find quite fascinating, and you could talk to the students about how that affects them. You could look at case studies That is, how do we understand the urban environments? Why do some people end up living in poorer areas where the houses are cheaper, but there's less resources, whereas other people have more opportunities by living in the wealthier areas where houses are more expensive? You could look at student research. How can you encourage students to research urban places? You could look at using debate and discussion. You could look at using mapping. You could look at various assessments that could be used, tasks, essays, reports, presentations, and so on. Alternatively, if you chose the people and economic activities, which is fascinating, what does it mean to thrive economically? Is this just money, or is there much more to thriving in life than just money? What's economic activity all about, such as primary economic activity and rural economic activity, secondary activity, and also service industries. You could also look at population growth, ebb and flow, even in the areas in which you live. What's this mean for the future and the challenges faced by urbanisation? And we have questions about housing and so on. And you could do case studies there, develop inquiry skills, look at the government's role. And so some people prefer the government to have less interference. And then, and sometimes people on the right would say the government needs to tax less and have less interference. This comes from the French government, where sitting on the right or the left had different influences. And then people on the left are often more interested in more intervention and taxing more and looking after the poor more. And so, what's the role of government in various social and urban and economic activities? So there's a lot you can look at, including tourism, resource management, globalization, and also the environment. So, Beth, do you have any questions about this final task that we'll do in the last week of the course?
I don't think so. I think if anything, it would just be good to see
So,
a
yeah,
sample, yeah, sample units, um,
yeah.
especially with being according, with the new syllabus as well. I don't know if there are sample units available yet on.
Yeah, I think, yeah, probably they should be out there somewhere, but one could have a look. Obviously, they've been around for around 3 years now, so there should
Mm.
be units. And even in your school and in other schools, you could make inquiries, and sometimes that can be useful as well. I don't think we network enough. And
Mm.
so, if you're interested in these areas, you could make contact with other schools around and say, what are you doing in geography year 11, 12, and in your own school? What's happening in geography year 11, 12? And of course, a key document to go to will be the New South Wales curriculum 2022, where you can carefully go through some of the course structures and requirements, the life skills that are involved, and there's quite a bit of detail there. Though not enough detail in some ways, I think. There's quite a bit of discussion on the importance of fieldwork in geography. This will be very important for you in your first assignment. And so I encourage you to go to the New South Wales guidelines, and you see there that the Disability Discrimination Act requires certain activities. You could quote these sorts of things, and you could put that into your first assignment. There's also information on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander principles and protocols, so you could include that in your first assignment, and there's some great detail there. There's also detail on diversity of learners, which I think would be very valuable to consider. not only in terms of First Nation Aboriginal students, but also the students who have disabilities and also those who have intellectual disabilities and also those who are particularly gifted and talented and students who have other languages such as English as a second language. So there's a lot of different resources that you could consider there from the New South Wales curriculum for year 11 and 12 geography. And so encourage a careful look at that. As noted here, there's a strong focus on the Earth's natural systems. And that's what we're focusing on in the first one or two assignments. And then there's quite a focus on human activity, which we're focusing on in the final assignment, but also in terms of the effect that humans have on the environment. And so there's a huge discussion at the moment on human environment interactions because it is having huge effects, and these need to be considered in many areas that we are involved in. And so you can quote these resources as some of the resources that you use. I also encourage you to go to Google Scholar and to put in there New South Wales geography teaching senior year 11, 12, and gather some resources. What are people doing in terms of teaching geography? You'll notice that some here you can go straight to. Others you'll have to go through your college library, such as the Alpha Crucis College Library. If you click on Cite, CITE, you can copy that, Control C, and you've got a copy of the address for that resource. And then you can read it and make a summary of that resource and put those words in your own words. And so you've got some valuable information from these resources that are available. I find Google Scholar is particularly valuable, and you can set the year range. So you might choose just the last 5 years or so and get more recent resources, which will be more up to date and contemporary, and that will be very valuable for you as well. So in this introduction, I've briefly introduced the material on Moodle, which I'll encourage you to spend about 5 hours a week reading through the weekly content material, watching some of the resources, and making notes on that so that you're up to date with the topics that are covered each week, and then 5 hours working on the assignments. And then a major part of this introduction has covered the three assignments with a fair bit of emphasis on the first assignment, which is preparing a fieldwork activity. And then in 2 weeks' time, in week 3, we'll have a closer look at how you're going with that first assignment, and we'll have further discussion on the first 4 weeks' topics that are covered here in this subject. So Bethany, do you have any questions on what we have covered and what is being covered in this subject?
Just for the first assignment,
Mm,
I've not like I did the geography part A subject last semester, and
yes.
I've got a good idea of how the lesson sequence and the unit of work for assessments 2 and 3 should look. However, for the first assessment with constructing, the teacher plan and the student handout, I'm just wondering if there are any examples or a template even that could be useful for that for
Yeah,
the first.
I'll have a look. And then also, if you want to have a look at what your school's using and what you've used in other subjects as well, I think the main thing is to find those that you're most comfortable with and most familiar with, and also those that are going to be most useful for that which you're doing in the schools that you're likely to be working in the state that you're likely to be working in. But I'll have a look as well. And then you can also email me examples, and each fortnight when we meet, you can also show me examples, and on share, I can share the screen, and that'll give you opportunity to put up your example, what you're working with, and also to discuss through in your template and in your lesson sequence and other materials that you're preparing, why you present it in such a way and what you see as useful. I think it's worth thinking more deeply about how we present things, why we present them in a certain way. And I do find, yeah, the lesson plans, lesson sequences, templates, all of these details that we write down are very, very useful for us in our planning. And they also help us to show others what we're doing. And when we're away and not able to come in one time, we can have these lesson plans available. And also, many schools now are requiring you to have these, and students and parents to be able to see those lesson plans that you have. Yeah.
Yep. I think my confusion's more with the first assessment for the fieldwork
Yes. Yes.
um, where
Yeah.
it's to construct a teacher plan and a student handout. So I'm just curious because my school
Yeah.
doesn't run stage six geography, so
Yes.
not
Yes.
actually seen that something like that before. Um,
Yeah.
so just yeah, information or examples of what that looks like would be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll have a look and see what we can find there and put up there.
Thank you.
And yeah, so let's do that as well. Yeah,
Thank
sounds
you.
good. Any further questions?
I don't think so. I guess the only other thing would be like, is the weekly expectation for the tiles on Moodle, is
Yes.
just to be looking
Mhm.
at the readings, or are there any other
Yeah, I
activities that
think.
we have to engage with, or
No, I think mainly it's up to you as to how much you put in, and I think you get out of it what you put in, and also that becomes fairly obvious in the assignments. So I think each week, if you fairly briefly read through, when you find items of interest that are raised, then keep make a note of those, and it's a good strategy to have a one page or more set of notes that you take from each of the weekly plans. And then I would have them on my computer, and then I would cut and paste these different resource addresses. I'd write a brief summary of what they cover, and then some of the different resources that are available. And as you said, as they've changed in 2022 and as they change at different times, make a note of that. Then there's other resources such as these. This one here on by Blomberg discusses Christian schools and wisdom and postmodernity. So I would tend to read through about the first three or so pages, look for ideas there, and if I'm finding real value in this, I know at one stage I looked a lot more deeply at postmodernity, and I still look at the concepts of modernity and post-modernity. So you may find value in that. And then you've got another article here on the future of geography education. I think it can well be argued that their history education, geography education, and various arts are very important. Literacy education. And here we've got a discussion of the future of geography education. That'd be a reasonable resource to cut and paste. You could put this into Google Scholar. You could gather a bit of information. So I would tend to read about the first page or two and then see if that's going to be a valuable resource. This one on themes in geography curriculum, I think is quite a valuable resource in that it raises the question for me is how do students find value in geography? What are students likely to be interested in geography? And this flows over into other subjects that I teach. I'm always seeking to find that which is going to be stimulating and interesting for the students. So these are the sort of things that I'd be going through, and I'd be allocating somewhere between 3 to 5 hours to go through some of this material. But at the same time, I'd be thinking about how can this be applied in the 3 assessment items that I'll be working on as well. You'll notice that there's some questions here as well. So you could think about for a year 11 class, if you were to discuss the importance of geography, that could be worth doing. And if we had more time, you and I, as students and teacher, could discuss the importance of geography. I think it's so important that students see the value of what they're doing. And I've tried to mention today that we need to know what's happening with dry areas and wet areas around and floods and fires if we're going to choose the right place to live, to build a house, to build a business. Everything in life is going to relate to geographic questions. And so these are important as well. So I think around 3 to 5 hours, we're saying 5 hours for each of the weekly topics. How's that sound, Beth? Does that sort of fit in?
Um, yeah, I mean, easy, but yeah,
And then again, I guess we're always under pressure to cut it back less than 5 hours. But at the same time, if you were doing less work and less studies, you'd put in more than 5 hours, which is why part-time students who've got less on their plate sometimes do a bit more as well. Yeah. And then week 2, we've got teaching the whole child, which is thinking about how the student is responding to these things that we're raising in these geographic discussions. And as a Christian, I'm very interested in what the notion of this world being God's world means. And if God's given us the land and given us the water, what does that mean? I'm also interested in other questions. So, what does it mean to have a nation, which covers over into history? So, in some ways, Indigenous people have a fair bit of responsibility for this nation, and then Europeans have come here as well, and so we now live together. And these are sort of discussions that the students can have. How do we help Indigenous and European people to work together? And then within our societies, the richer people and the poorer people to work together, and the men and the women to work together, and the different cultures to work together. So it flows over into social science and other areas and questions as well from the geographic questions that we're also looking at as well. Any other questions, Beth?
I'm just wondering, in terms of the first the rec this recording of this class, um,
Mm.
and also the document that you were using before to go through the assessments and the examples. Will both of those things be available on Moodle?
Yes, I can put those up on Moodle in the next 2 days. So I'll
Amazing.
put
Thank you.
them up there and they'll be available for yourself and other students as well. And if you have any urgent questions between now and 2 weeks' time, we'll meet on the. Now, the final question is what time suits best and which week suits best? So we're meeting on week 1. Do you have any major preference between week 1, which is odd numbers, or week 2, week 4, week 6, which is even numbers? Any preference between those two?
I don't think so. I think the five to 6:30 works well for me,
Yep.
if it does for everyone else.
Yep.
My only thought would be what your opinion is in terms of odd and even weeks, what works best for when assessments are due. Because I know that the assessments are mostly due in even weeks, I think.
Mm. Yes, so we could switch from, so if you'd like to meet next week, we could meet briefly and then we could go even weeks from then on. Is that a good plan?
Yeah, that's
And
if you
yeah,
think that's probably a better way to kind of screen questions for assessments due in even.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not sure what your opinion. If you think odd weeks are better for that or even weeks, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we might. We can try the even weeks next week, and there's just the one other student that we're wanting to pick up
Hmm.
next week, and then will that give you opportunity to look at assignment one in particular in the next 6 days before next week? Would that work for you?
I think so. I think my main
Yep.
thing will be figuring out, um, I think what was the topic for assessment one? I think it was ecosystems at risk, potentially.
It's field work. And so you assessment one is you've got to choose a field work place to go and look at. And as you say, the topic is the ecosystems. They are at risk. So that's the major one. Yeah.
Yeah. So just, I think for me, just figuring out, because that's
Mm.
the old syllabus. Um,
Yes.
so before,
Ah,
yeah.
yes.
So
What do you think?
all the titles of the units in the assessments are based on the old syllabus. So
Yes, where would I quickly find the so I went so it's not under the Australian curriculum, is it? It's under the
no, uh,
yeah,
where is it?
yeah,
I think it's
reporter. Yeah. So so realizing that the older version had a greater emphasis on ecosystems at risk, and the 2022 version has a broader emphasis on the Earth's natural ecosystems and all that's going on more broadly, and also the ecosystems and global diversity and all that's going on. In your assignment, you could go more broadly there. So you could look more broadly at ecosystems, all of the factors involved. You don't have to focus on ecosystems at risk. And I would think the safest thing to do, if you want, is to actually cover both. That is, what's meant by an ecosystem, what are the factors involved, and then I would think something like 30 to 50% could be the risk factors due to human interactions. It really comes down to what you see the curriculum is saying is important, what's for the students important. And I think both are important. It's important that we understand that there are complex factors involved that are way beyond our control. And then there are the risk factors involved. Now, of course, the risk factors include both human interaction and then they also include the way the environment impacts us. So, if you were to look, say, at water and your school grounds, you can see that there is a huge amount of water comes onto your school grounds, but the opposite can occur. There can be dry periods where your plants and grass could all dry, and then the risk is what happens if flood comes through, and so that raises risk questions. But the ecosystem questions raise bigger questions: as where does the water come from? That is, there's the flow of the winds and they impact in different ways. So does that make sense, Bethany, as to how you've got to make decisions on what you're going to focus on here, don't you?
yeah, yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think before our next class, I'll just spend some time comparing um,
Mm,
the old syllabus and the new syllabus and
mm.
look at what matches, like you say, what matches best. And because it does, it looks like that the new syllabus has made things more broad.
Yes.
So yeah, look, I think it's mostly all pretty similar stuff apart from the titles of the units, really. Um, so
Mm,
yeah, I think that's probably best to figure out, what's most relevant for the school and the students' current
mm,
surroundings. Um, I think I'll go with that and continue to
mm.
over the next week, just look at the two different syllabus documents and see what fits best.
And it raises the challenge of when syllabus
Yeah,
wording changes, and
yeah.
it also raises the challenge of identifying what you see as the most significant and what do scholars and thinkers see as most significant. And clearly, some are focused on risk factors. And then others are focused on the ecosystems more broadly, and there are different views from the left and the right politically on these things as well, which is broader discussions. So these are things to look at. We'll meet again in 6, 7 days' time on Tuesday. We'll have a brief meeting then and see how we're progressing, and then we'll meet each even week on the way through. And I look forward to working with you there. Any further questions?
Just what's the best way to get into contact with you? Is it email? Is that best?
Yeah, I think so. So the Alpha Crucis email at this stage is the best. If
Yeah.
that proves too difficult at any stage, then let me know. If at any stage you need an extra meeting, then we could arrange that as well. And Zoom is probably the best way to meet there. But anytime, if you send me an email to the Alpha Crucis email within a day, I should pick up on that and get back to you on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
And if you want to send me drafts at any stage or thoughts you want to explore, happy to work with that as well. And before you hand your assignments in, if you want to show me drafts as well, then happy to offer feedback on that as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to working with you on this subject over the coming weeks. So
Yeah,
thank
you
you.
too. Thank you. So next week.
Next
Next.
week, week
Yep, and
two.
then
Sounds
evening.
good. Yeah,
Perfect.
work on the even ones. Yeah,
Great.
thanks,
Thank you
then.
so much.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. Appreciate that.
Yes.